You
I
start.
it. Okay. Hi, Jackie.
Hi,
It's
Harry.
great to rant this week. So, how was your week?
It was a good week. I'm just trying to think of what is. Oh, my normal's pretty good, you know. I had some extra medical care for my leg, my knee this last week. So I have to tell you that despite all of our challenges with our healthcare system, I was able to get exactly what I needed last week. So it was good. You know, I'm still in the system. We'll see what happens, but got quite a bit of relief and had one of those moments where I'm really thankful for our healthcare. But I have a long road ahead of me still, so I'm just going to stay optimistic, but cautiously optimistic. Can we be cautiously optimistic?
For sure.
Okay. How about you? What was your week like?
So, week was interesting. Like, I was reading about like how the financial system and the tax system is unfair to people who are single, especially older folks. Like property taxes and the RRSPs, how they are unfair. So I was like going to write something about it. So that's still going on in my brain. So
So is everything I'm telling you coming true in the literature?
yeah, so that's our new normal though. Like more and more people are choosing to remain single, right?
Okay.
Both at younger age and both at adult age.
Younger
So-
age as well.
Younger age as well. So the amount of partnerships and amount of like marriage, the percentage is going low, right, each year. So that's going to be a new normal. So how do we like probably we have to change some laws and the tax system to be fair, right? So that was my new normal. That was my new that was my last
Well, I may suggest that you're adjusting because we've had these conversations
Yes.
quite a bit over the last year or two, and you're relatively recently married, a couple of years, and children. But as I prepare towards this next phase of my life, I have been utterly in shock, as you know, putting together my estate and updating my will and planning for my retirement, and absolutely taken aback of what I did not realize went to my child because I'm single.
Yes.
So we need to explore that a bit more, and I bet you found out more than what even I have discovered,
Yes.
because you're saying now we should come to expect this. I shouldn't have been
Yes.
so surprised.
Yeah, and like definitions of lot of things are changing the way people look at things. So for example, like retirement, which we are going to talk about in today's show, right? The very concept of what it means to
Yeah.
retire has changed. So
Absolutely.
the first question to get the ball rolling,
Okay.
what is retirement for you?
Well, that's a loaded question. I think early in my working life, it was completely different than what it is now as I round the big 6-0. I grew up in a stage or started working back when we had something called Freedom 55. And so there was this idea that you would work and be able to retire in some way, shape, or form at 55. Now, myself and a lot of my friends were well beyond 55, and the thought of retiring was the furthest thing from our mind. But I think back on it now because my father retired at 55 or very close to it, and I see the difference of his lifestyle to what my lifestyle is now, because when I think about retirement, it's about finances, which are very different from previous generations. I think it's also redefined around lifestyle and the options, the things that I'm thinking of doing versus maybe what my parents were thinking of doing at the time, and understanding now more about their choices. So when I think about retirement, it's not necessarily to me about not working. I think retirement is about choice and being financially stable or financially independent enough where you can choose to work and do anything that you want. I'm not sure my generation is interested in absolutely doing nothing, but we have more options now than we ever thought before, where I'm not sure previous generations had that. It was work and then you didn't work.
Yes.
And the thought of Freedom 55, Harry, just blows my mind. But I know now with the fire movement and other things, I think it was, and with what I know about investing today, I think it was possible and I understand it more. But I think we're redefining retirement. So that's a long-winded answer to your question. And I think it's still shifting as my generation gets to retirement. I don't think we fully are capable of understanding right now all of our options.
Wow. So let's break down a few things that I caught up from like
Okay.
what the rant that you had.
I haven't started ranting yet.
So the first thing is, how has lifestyle changed? So you said that financially it has changed, like lifestyle has changed. So what's the change that you foresee? Means you probably saw retirement differently, the retirement lifestyle differently earlier. Now you see retirement lifestyle differently. So what's the change been?
I think I imagined way back when is having retirement, not working, staying in one place. I don't know if I imagined a house or what. I don't recall what I thought of that. But I did remember thinking, oh, maybe one day I won't work and I will be in one place. And it was going to be here in Alberta. Never imagined anything else. Beyond that, I didn't really think about it. It was so far away. But now that I'm here and I've, as you know, tried to retire a couple times and get pulled back into working, I see work differently because I do know now that I'm working the way I want to versus what I feel I have to. And work has taken on a completely different meaning. So when I think about retirement, there's a part of me that says I am retired right now because I'm off sort of a career trajectory. I've removed myself from that. I am now doing something I truly love doing and with lots of flexibility, and I'm just enjoying it differently. So I think the difference now is being off that corporate rat race kind of trajectory and thinking about how I would earn a little bit of money or not earn a little bit of money. But it's never about not doing something, if that makes sense. I do know friends that have had traditional retirements. I'm retiring and I'm moving to my cabin and I'm not working at all. They're done. That's happening far less, I think, than I maybe expected it to. So I don't know if does that flag any more questions in you?
Absolutely, lots of them.
Oh, okay. Oh my goodness.
You said like earlier you used to think that retirement is about staying just in Alberta. Has your views changed on that? Like, is retirement different now, or like you view it differently now?
I think I view it differently in that while I'll always remain an Albertan, I don't see myself here 12 months a year for a couple of reasons. One is I have friends that are all over the world and travel. I also have a bit of a nomadic son that I want to be able to pick up and go to wherever he is. But for me, primarily, I have fallen in love with some places around the world that I'm really comfortable, and they're just far cheaper to live. I'm quite shocked at the cost of everyday living in Alberta, and I would say in Canada generally, but also as a single person as I prepare my future and what will really drive me away from staying in my house, for example. And maybe, as I've learned, is living elsewhere as part of my retirement. So I don't know if you've seen that in your past as a financial planner or in your network. Are people staying in Canada or Alberta longer?
People are increasingly looking at options where you can arbitrage your
You talked about that.
arbitrage your cost of living. So for example, like not everyone is very fortunate in terms of saving a lot of money for retirement, but like just to give a perspective to people who might not know this, in Canada we have 2 or 3 layers of support you can take on or you can withdraw from when you retire. One is a big chunk comes from the government, right?
Yes.
It's not enough. People have a misunderstanding that they can just retire on that money, right? The cost of living does not allow it right now.
I would agree with that.
Yes, I would say 25% to 30% of your post-retirement expenses can be covered by the government help. It depends on lifestyle for sure.
Yes.
If you're golfing on expensive clubs, like that ratio would drop.
And every day.
Yeah, that's the financial part of it.
Okay.
So what is the government help that we get in retirement? So it is in 3 ways, right? First is the Canada Pension Plan.
Yes.
As we work, right, we contribute into Canada Pension Plan, right? And our employer contributes in that too. They match that.
Yes.
So each month from your paycheck, there is a certain reduction that goes into CPP, Canada Pension Plan. And when you retire, that pot of money is going to come to you slowly in terms of a monthly pension. So that's the contribution way of government helping us. We contribute into a pot, and from that pot we withdraw when we retire. The second part comes from like residents, and like it's a fascinating story behind it, the old age security, why it was started.
Yeah, why was it started?
So in the patriarchal society that we had, right?
Or have?
We still have it, right, to a large extent, but like we had like the intensity of it has been decreasing, right?
Okay.
So in the earlier society, only one person in a traditional marriage used to work. Usually it used to be husband, and they had the CPP contributions going because they contributed into the CPP, right? They had their employer pensions going, or they had investments, right? But what used to happen is when the person died, right, the surviving spouse had very little help, because there is a survivor pension that you get in CPP, but it's not the full pension.
That's right. It's a percentage of
the pension.
It is a percentage. But they still, the spouse still gets something.
Spouse still gets something, right? But that's the only CPP part. What happens about the investment? And what if the spouse dies early, right? They had virtually no help. So the government thought, instead of having a contributory system, let's have an additional layer where these spouses, more specifically women who were not working, who were homemakers, right, they have an additional layer of help, because they, like, the longer you stay in Canada, the more old age security you get, right? The longer you stay in Canada, the more it's a residency base. Each year you have a residency, you can prove your residency. Filing taxes is one way of doing it, right? Or just residing in Canada is another way of doing it. Any way to prove residency, the higher the old age security becomes, right? The longer you stay, it's a stay based, it's a residency based system. It's not a contributory based system. Right. So if a spouse, if a woman is living for 40 years, is a homemaker, she will get the old age security.
Yeah, old age security.
Yeah.
But so does the partner, the husband.
So does the partner if the person is staying. So it's a social assistant. It's not a contributory assistant. Right. It's a social assistant. So that was the thought behind starting the old age security, and it has been a big boost, right? Especially to women who used to be homemakers, the older generation, right? Even in newer generations, people who are choosing not to work, like it helps them to a large extent. But then old age security is income tested, because they do not want to pay old age security people who have lot of money coming in their retirement. So if you have lot of money coming in your retirement from your employer pension, from your CPP, from your RRSPs and stuff, then old age security starts to go down. So it is specifically for people who do not have a lot of help in retirement, right? That can get maximum amount of old age security. So that is the second layer, right? The third layer is guaranteed income supplement. People who are
GIS.
really poor,
Yes.
right? They don't even like have contributed into CPP, like they can get additional help in GIS. So that's the big chunk. Now people have mistaken it that this chunk is enough. It's not enough. The way the cost of living is,
Do people really feel or that's their expectation?
because and people are not in expecting that, because that was how it was promoted, right? The earlier governments, if you read back their promotions, their campaign promises, for this episode I did a lot of reading, they used to say that would be enough. And the cost of living has gone up so high
Absolutely.
that it doesn't cover. And like Alberta is still a silver lining. The cost of living in Alberta as compared to the other metro provinces like Vancouver, like Ontario or BC, it's still lower. But like in those provinces, it doesn't even come close to 20% of the post-retirement needs.
Harry, when you were doing this reading, when did CPP start? Do you recall?
So if I'm not wrong, it was in the 1960s that it started.
And OAS?
Old age security was little later than that.
Maybe the 70s?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's when it started.
Huge difference in cost of living.
Huge difference. And that's not enough. So people who are only getting that, like maybe it's too late for you to plan right now. We will of course talk about different generations, but there are a lot of people who are poor in their retirement, and it's just not like that's the only chunk that they can have. So that's where what you were saying really comes true. There is a cost arbitrage there, right? Cost of living is high in Canada. It's not high everywhere to the same extent. So there are European countries that have similar standard of living, right? Have similar, probably better environment than we do, right? Have nature, because Canadians love nature, like being outdoors. So you can start looking at those retirement options if you are just relying on the government, because just relying on the government is not going to get you much ahead. Forget ahead, will not even be probably enough to survive in Canada.
You'd be below the poverty line for an individual if
exactly.
you just relied on CPP and OAS for your retirement.
Yeah, so if you're a younger retired person, or you're not that old, you can probably look at that cost of living arbitrage and go somewhere else if you're just relying on that chunk.
How does that impact? You've already qualified for OAS, so you've got your residency there.
Yes.
In terms of that social program, and then you've contributed to CPP, you've stopped working.
Yes.
Is there any requirement for people to stay or come back to Canada?
Now that has a lot of nuances to it.
Okay.
So CPP you will always get.
Wherever you are in the world.
Wherever you are in the world does not matter. It's contribution based. You contribute, you get it back. Right, so CPP, if it is a big chunk of what you're getting from the government, you're going to always get that. Now, old age security, like it is of course based on residence, but you have to maintain that residence, right? So, what is maintaining residence? The government is not very clear on that. So, if you file taxes in Canada, that is still keeping residence. Even if you are living in Portugal, you come back for a few months in a year, you keep the residence, you meet your family, you file taxes here, right? That officially keeps the residence out here, right? So you have to connect with the CPA to understand it more, right? But it's not very clear. People who live outside still get old age security, right? And they manage to do that by keeping some kind of roots out here.
Of course.
Yes.
Because if I remember correctly as well, Harry, there's 40 years required of residency for the max amount of OAS.
Yes.
And so whether you're in Canada or not, and I guess this is the nuance you think about, like you're saying, is that if somebody's gone for 9 or 10 months of the year, say they've already earned their OAS.
Yes.
And they come back to file wherever they are.
Yes.
That means their taxes are also paid in Canada still,
Yes.
right? So they would still get their OAS and still get their CPP regardless.
Yes.
Okay.
So that was one big chunk of money. The second chunk of money that most Canadians, not all, but fortunate Canadians have, right, is a defined benefit plan. So, or a defined contribution. That is employer provided pension.
You can have defined contribution and defined benefit,
Yeah.
right?
So,
They're different, but through your working life, you can have both.
Through your working life, but it is basically you have an employer, you have a pension plan with them, you contribute into that pension plan, right? They match that contribution, and when you retire, they're going to give you some kind of pension out of that.
Yes.
Right? It can be market linked if it is a defined contribution plan.
Right.
So it changes based on the stock market and the bond markets, or it can be like a fixed pension based on a certain formula. Right, so defined benefit plan is that. So that is the second chunk of money that Canadians can rely on, right? If you're older, you might already have that. If you're younger, like try to get into a job that has that, because those pensions are golden, because they're taking the risk away from you, especially defined benefit plans.
Well, and I know that for a lot of my students that I teach in my programs, and even for the young adults in my life, part of your compensation when you start working are your employer matched programs. So you max those programs. If you put in 5% and they're going to put in 5%, you take that. It is part of your total rewards package. Consider it money from your employer for your future, and just do it. You don't even question it.
Exactly.
Because it's matching. By not doing that, you're leaving money on the table.
Absolutely. So try to max out those plans, like you rightly said. Right. If it is a defined benefit, it's you don't have a choice. But if it is a defined contribution, you have a choice. Then try to maximize that contribution, because retirement wealth is usually like generated slow and steady, and that's a good way of doing it, right?
Yes.
And then there is third chunk where you do it yourself. You from your daily life, you try to put away some money, right? You invest that money in different assets, real estate, stocks, bonds, and GICs and whatnot. And when you retire, you use that money, right? Either regular dividends or you sell assets and you live off of that. So these are three basic chunk, but I just want to clear the misunderstanding that many people have. Government help is not enough. So you have to build on the government help by either getting an employer plan or trying to do it yourself, right, by making investments.
And I would say as well, Harry, just to go one step further, is that you can't rely solely on those programs as from the government.
No.
You also have, it's very hard for younger people to imagine 40 years down the road.
Yes.
Because I started saving and didn't understand a lot of the key concepts. And so my feeling is, in addition to maxing your employer programs and all those sorts of things, is try and build that literacy for yourself to understand what all of these are, and imagine yourself 40 years down the road. I just wanted to add that, because I think it's so important, so that when you hit 50, 60, and 70, because I know people working well into their late 60s, that they think those government programs will be enough. They won't.
Yes.
But you have to imagine your life 40 years down the road, which I think is hard for a lot of young folks.
Yes, so like slow and steady wins the race in terms of retirement wealth. So go slow, be consistent, right? And like there are great like ways to go about it. Like, how did you look at it when you were young? How did you start your retirement journey? Like thinking about retirement, saving retirement?
Well, I knew about the RRSP, and my first job, I did max any employer programs I had. Just, it made sense to me. I'm not sure I imagined 40 years down the road. I absolutely not. But I knew it was financially the right thing to do. And I'd always been a saver, and I'd always been organized with my money and those sorts of things. So when I started working full time, I took advantage of any of those programs I had. But I did have a cousin who was working at a brokerage company at the time.
Yeah.
And I think she got incented a little bit that if she signed people up, it was good for her and the broker she was supporting. And so I signed up. Of course, I wanted to help her. But it changed my life, and I have her to thank for that, because I started putting in $50 on the 15th of the month. And I remember thinking, Harry, how am I going to afford to do this? Because my first job, I think, was $23,000 a year,
Yes.
right? Back in 1990, I think it was. And living in Toronto. But that $50 once a week just continued. I never closed that account.
Wow.
And then, of course, I had a defined contribution at some employers. So I would put in 5% of my salary and my employer put in 5%. But I chose the fund where it went. So I just put it into this fund my cousin set up for me. And I will say, I didn't know anything about the fund. I completely trusted her. I don't know if it was risky, low risk. I have no idea to this day. But I never touched that money
Wow.
since I was 22 years old.
Yeah.
I eventually did take some money out to fund my graduate degree.
Yes.
Best thing I ever did.
Yeah.
They didn't have the lifelong program at the time, but I do believe I have earned the back what I put in. I did as well have money for my first home I bought, paid myself back,
Yes.
and I've grown a nice fund.
Yeah.
Because even when I did those things, I had 20 to 25 years of accumulation time. But I would say I'm an accidental investor. And I did not know what I had until about 2 years ago. And I'm incredibly grateful. But I did not go into it strategically. And I'm sure I'm not the only person that has done that. Very thankful today. I am completely the beneficiary of time in the market, not timing the market.
Yes.
I am a full beneficiary of compound interest. And I have been able to leverage my RRSP in my lifetime for a couple key pivotal moments that made a huge difference to my earning potential and for where I am today. So I'm incredibly grateful. But I did not know what I was doing.
Wow.
So I'm not sure we can do that today in today's world.
Yeah.
But there's access to so much more information today.
Yeah,
And I
so-
manage my own account today.
Like, that's amazing. Like, the few points I picked up, like even saving $50 when you're young and when you have, like, especially when you have family like Ben and stuff, it gets very hard, right? So life comes in between retirement, right? That's what I always think about, because you want to save, but there is like no wiggle room. You will have like summer camps,
Yes.
and you will have
Yes.
you will have like people falling sick days off, like something goes wrong in life. That's why, like, there is a great saying, like, always save first and then spend. Keep a habit, and when you have more money, try to save more. Like, just pick up on that habit, because effectively it will pay itself off like down the road, right? But just to build on it, like, if I, like, young listeners who are listening,
Yes.
if they want to, like, strategically go about their retirement, the first thing I would do, like, you get a job, right? You're 21 years old, you're just out of college. You should first start a first housing savings account.
Yes. Number one
FHSA.
today, because we did
Number
not
one.
have that.
Yes. So start a first housing savings account. Start contributing the maximum amount possible, $8,000. So that is priority number one. Now, why that account? So first of all, primary residence has been one of the main drivers for people in Canada to generate wealth, right? That's just the fact. The housing prices have gone up a
Yes.
lot over the years.
Because
right?
for the next generation, I'm not convinced that's the case anymore.
Yeah, but there is a tax advantage.
Yes.
Whatever-
For the first homeowners.
Yeah, for the first homeowners.
Yes.
I'm not saying second property a bad idea, right?
No.
I do not prescribe to building multiple doors, and like you need to know the business to actually do that.
Yes.
It's not for everyone. Real estate is a business, right? Like just like running a coffee shop. Not every coffee shop is successful, right? But first house, there is a lot of merit to it. So how I would do it if I was 21, I would open a first housing savings account.
Yes,
I'll
absolutely.
try to contribute the maximum amount I can. Now, where would I invest my money? This is not investment advice, but some low, because it is for down payment for your first house. So I would invest in something that is low volatility, pays good dividends, doesn't move that much, right? So low volatility, low cost ETFs is where I would go. Right?
I also want to point out, if someone chooses not to buy a house with that fund, at a
Yes.
certain point you can roll it over to your RSP.
RRSP.
So it is money for your long-term wealth
Yes.
in a variety of ways.
But I like we'll talk about RRSPs. I don't prescribe to
Yes,
that.
no.
It's a great product because like there are a lot. We will
Yeah,
go into details
agree.
after this, but focus on a first housing savings account. There are two advantages to it. Whatever, it is tax free, right? So whatever growth happens, it is not tax deferred like RRSP. It is tax free.
Yes.
When you withdraw the money, that is completely tax free, has no impact on you. Second, you get a tax deduction too, right? So your taxes become lower. Not material because your taxes would already be very low as a young person, but that's the account you first max out.
Mm-hmm.
You build it up, buy your first property, be very careful, right? Try to buy something that is really manageable. So 2 to 3 times of your like income, that is where you should land for your first place at least. Buy a small condo, that is what
2 to 3 times
2
your
to
annual
3 times of
salary,
your annual
gross
salary.
salary.
Hard in a lot of cities, but if you can manage, like you don't need a big place as a young person, so try to like, or if you have a partner then it becomes easier, but try to get into a place, right, that is just 2 to 3 times of your income, right? So let's say you by the time you have accumulated in your down payment in 5-6 years, you end up at $100,000 of salary. So 2 to 3 times is like 300,000. Don't go beyond that. Like have a small condo that you can manage, right?
And that is meant for your housing.
That is meant for your housing.
However you flip that in the years to come for your
Yes.
retirement, but
For sure, that will not be your forever house. You're going to move on to like a bigger house when you have higher salary, higher wealth, and so on. But that's a good starting point. So if you are doing that, then if you have additional money, do not go into RRSPs.
when
right?
you're young, yeah.
Yeah, a lot of factors are there. RRSPs just tax defers your income.
Yes.
Like I was looking at the historical chart. RRSP makes sense when you're paying very high taxes right now and you think that your taxes are going to be lower in your retirement. But if you see the historical chart, right?
Yes.
Taxes were lower 30 years back than they are right now. So
Yes,
people,
that's right.
yeah, so people who have people saved 15% taxes when they started the RRSP account, and now they're like the lowest tax bracket itself is like 30%, right?
That's true.
So effectively you're paying more taxes on that money right now. So like RRSPs should not be your priority. Second part, it is very damaging if you remain single, right?
Yes.
In your
yes,
retirement.
Yes,
Right?
it is.
If you end up being single, you might have a partner right now, but nothing lasts forever. So if you might have a partner right now, but if that partner it doesn't work out for you and you end up single in retirement, and like God forbid there is death, the entire RRSP becomes part of your estate and it is taxed at the highest tax bracket, depending on how much it is, but more or less it is taxed at the highest tax bracket.
So here's my rant on that.
Yes.
Is that I redid my will a couple years ago, as you know.
Yes.
And when I discovered that, I was mad.
Yes.
Because I realized what I had accumulated starting it when I was 22 at $50 a month.
Yes.
And that money will not go to my son. It will go to my estate and it will be taxed.
Yes.
and maybe be subject to probate fees. Is that correct?
Yes, if you don't have a nominee on it.
Okay.
If you have a nominee on it, if your son is a nominee,
Yes.
you avoid the probate fees. But if you don't have that, you still incur that, and on top of that, it becomes your income, so it will be taxed at a very high tax bracket.
So he is on those RSPs, but they will be taxed.
Yes.
Maybe not probate fees, but taxed. So part of me says, and I mentioned this to some of my friends, the ones who are married, it goes over to the partner. Am I correct?
Yes.
So that's right. So it's not taxed till much later in life.
Yes.
For somebody else, yet mine gets taxed right away.
Exactly.
Yeah,
and
that is. I'm shocked at that actually.
Yeah, and life is unfortunate. What if you die like at 50 without even coming close to retirement, right? Then that entire RRSP is like, let's see, I'm just making stuff up.
I
You
know.
have $500,000 of RRSP, right? Not hard to get in 25 years, right? With if you remain consistent, not very hard to do, right? That will be shoved in half, right? So 250,000 you're paying to the government. So I don't think it's a great plan, right? Especially if you're not in a very high tax bracket. So if you're in a 47% tax bracket, like go at it. Like RRSP is a great tool for you. But if you're already in 30% tax bracket, right? The way the government is run with deficits, eventually our taxes are going to be higher than what they are right now, right? So what are you saving for? Like, so I would rather focus on tax-free savings account,
The TFSA.
after consuming first housing savings account.
Yes.
So just like dump whatever money you have in a tax-free savings account and build your wealth there. Now, if you're young, you can go for higher risk products. You can go for higher growth, right? You can go for index funds. They're great to accumulate wealth, right, for a long period of time, and just max out your tax-free savings account, right, after you do the first housing savings account.
So
as a young person.
So for us who are rounding our 60s, the TFSA came in much later. I would say 2010.
2010 was when it was started. Right, then.
So it's been around for 15 years, roughly?
Yeah.
So to be able to, and I had a TFSA, I will say, but I had always used it as a savings.
Yes.
I did not understand the investment growth there. So for people in my generation, making sure they understand the value of the TFSA and start to, with the money that you're investing now in your 50s for your 60s and 70s, it's the TFSA that's going to make the difference to us in later on, not anymore in the RSPs.
Absolutely, because one more thing, like let's compare, like you start $100 investment in both. You're 21 years old, you go on till 65, right? You have, let's say, $700,000, just making stuff up, $700,000 in your tax-free savings account, $700,000 in your RRSP, right? Just assuming. Now, when you withdraw money from a tax-free savings account, it has zero impact.
Yes, that's right.
Zero
no
impact.
taxes.
So no taxes is one part, but it doesn't change your old age security. So if you have like $1 million in your tax-free savings account and you have no other investment, let's say, right? You're just getting CPP, right? You can technically qualify for GIS, Guaranteed Income Supplement. So along with old age security, which you will get completely, there will be no clawbacks. Clawback is when your income gets higher, the old age security gets lower.
And the benchmark is about 90 gross, or net.
So 90 gross, right? Or it counts everything: CPP, your employer pension, your RRSP, withdrawals, everything, right? Rental income, dividend income in a non-registered account, everything, right?
Okay. So
if you have a tax-free savings account, though, it doesn't count that. So you can technically withdraw $100,000 a year from your tax-free savings account, right? Get the complete old age security and get your CPP too. But if you had the same amount of money in an RRSP, when you withdraw from an RRSP, they take away your old age security.
If you hit over that threshold.
Over 90,000.
Yeah.
Yes. So again, like not a great product, right? RRSP, unless and until you're in a very high tax bracket, just according to me.
Yeah, it's a tax vehicle for sure.
Yes.
So one of the things as a single parent, and realizing a little bit over the years, I've always, and I way back when in the 1990s, I was a big wealthy barber. I started taking 10%. So that was the magic number, saving 10% for your future. So, so when I started all that, and of course the 10% grows as my career progressed. But when I was raising a child and I got my tax return money back after doing all my tax planning, that money did go to raising my son. I didn't move it over to my then TFSA or pay down a chunk of my mortgage or anything. I had to use it to raise my son.
Yes.
And I was always thankful for that. It was camp and everything. Because way back when, being a single parent, you know, for example, I once had to pay we had medical, we had Alberta healthcare insurance.
Yeah.
And I had to pay that for Ben as a single parent. But if I was married, you had two adults, you didn't pay for the kids.
Exactly.
But when you were single and had one child, we had to pay.
Yes.
So it was a disadvantage. So the cost of raising one child through the early 2000s was extraordinarily expensive.
And that's why you have to think about like these things like very crucially, because like just the statistic, right, more than 60% of partnerships or marriages, right, they end up in divorce, right? And so there is a very high chance, and you can see the numbers, there are lot of single retired individuals right now. And if they have lots of money in their RRSP, and they are either going to lose their old age security, right, if they withdraw, right, or if unfortunately the death happens, right, then the government is going to take half of it away anyways. So I would rather prioritize like tax-free savings account,
Absolutely.
Right, after maxing out my first housing savings account. Is just temporary. It's for your first house. You accumulate the down payment, you buy the house, right? That's the primary resident. You accumulate wealth in that, right? Apart from that, all other investments, I would rather focus first on tax-free savings account. RRSP is after that. If you are like still maxing out your TFSA and then you have some money, okay, well, very well, put it in a RRSP, but like focus first on tax-free savings account.
Yes.
Yes.
So you're out of your 20s and you're in your 30s, trying to imagine life 30 years down the road instead of 40.
Yeah.
How does a young family, how do you manage saving for retirement? How do you imagine retirement, and what are you doing right now to save in your family?
Retirement for me, like if you read the literature behind it, the psychological studies and stuff, the psychology of money, like the book talk about it. Retirement is a spectrum, right? There are people who are like hardcore FIRE, right? Financial independence, retire early. So what they do is they save like 50 to 70% of the monthly money they make after taxes. They put it into investments, and they just they live very frugally. They try to achieve the magic number and they retire, right?
Okay.
That's the extreme of the one spectrum. The second spectrum is die in your boots. So these are individuals who don't believe in retirement at all. They are like, okay, maybe you love your job, right? Or maybe you think you can contribute even when you're 90 years old. You're a businessman, right? Or businesswoman.
You're Warren Buffett.
You're Warren Buffett, or like Kathy Wood. She's a great female investor, right? If you're like that, you don't want to retire. So they have this mentality of die in your boots. So they want to contribute till the day they die, right? So it's a spectrum. So first you need to understand where you are in your spectrum, right? Are you those individuals who are going to save 70% of their paycheck, just like try to retire at 45, right? Just have enough money invested, right? That enables you to retire. We'll talk about how much is that, but that's one way. The second way is individuals who are going to die in their boots, right? So try to figure out where you are first.
So where are you?
So I'm probably on like, I have managed to have enough money to retire, but I would probably work till I die because I love what I do, right? It might not be work for money, right? It might be something different, but adding value in the world, right? It keeps you like engaged, and it there is a merit. There is a lot of research, right? Seniors who contribute in a positive way, right? They live longer.
Yes.
Like if they live longer, the Alzheimer rates are lower, the Parkinson's rates are lower in those individuals. So try to contribute as long as you can. That is what I believe in.
Sure.
But I do understand the philosophy that you should work because you want to, not because you have to.
And that's exactly where
Yes.
my shift has happened. So with you at home, both you and your partner work, doing things that
Yes.
you love doing. 2 young children. You've reached fire already, would you say, or close?
So very close to that. Like it depends on what you call retirement, right? Like
Well, no, I'm just talking about financial independence.
So
before having 2
just
children.
to how to measure that. So it is 25 times of your like annual expenses is what you should end up at. That is
Yes.
your retirement number. So let's say you are spending $100,000 like as a couple a year, then the magic number will be 2.5 million. So once you reach 2.5 million, you can say that you have hit your like magic number, right? Then you can withdraw money from that and
Or make some
relatively
different
high
choices.
probability
Yeah.
that you will not run out of money, right? That's the magic number. So but there are many people like even after reaching that magic number, even after being comfortable in retirement, right, they still choose to work.
Absolutely. But then it's a choice.
It's a
And
choice.
that's the trick, I think.
Yes.
And with the flexibility you have with 2 small children being in your 30s, you have created an environment that you will have choice if it
Yeah.
overwhelms you raising the children
And
or where you want to be.
this is where I want to add the generational part.
Yes.
Save in your 20s. Because once you have a family in your 30s, if you choose to for sure, but if you plan to have a family in your 30s and 40s, and by the time they grow old, you're already in your 50s, it gets extremely hard to save.
So your
Right.
30s is much harder to
Much
save
harder,
with
like, especially
having children
with
and marriage,
children
maybe
and
divorce.
Maybe divorce takes 7 years financially to get out
recover.
of people. It
Yeah.
means get out of financially. So if you have a bad marriage and you want to like walk off, right, it's not easy to walk off. They're going to take half of whatever wealth you create together. If you don't have a prenup, then it's a whole another story, right? And nothing gets protected. Your pensions are not protected, right? So most people take 7 years of financial setback to get out of a
That's
bad
right.
partnership.
So that would change your whole view of any retirement plans you had. You
Exactly,
would
that
would
would-
need to revisit that.
Exactly. That's why save before you end up in a partnership, right? One
And
way
then
to
protect
protect
it.
yourself, right? And it's easier to save as a single person. You can be more frugal. But when your kid gets sick, it's there is no chance of being frugal there. You have to leave work, right? You may have to take a lower paycheck because of that. So that's very important. Start early, as early as you can. Save the maximum amount when you're young, right? When you start a family, it gets extremely hard to do that, and especially like if you have like bad partnerships and stuff, like then it's a whole another ride.
Another
then.
story. So let's move ahead to late 40s, 50s, and let me give you a scenario. Children are grown, maybe at university or finished. You were in your highest earning years.
Yes.
You imagine what your retirement could be,
Yes.
right? And you end up laid off, or in the middle of a trade war in North America and around the globe. How does somebody in their 50s navigate what is supposed to be your highest earning years? Your last 5 years of your investments are always the biggest gains, right?
Yes.
Biggest compound interest. And you might be drawing them down earlier because, or being asked to shift careers for your last 5 years. And what's your financial, like how do you, what do you suggest to the 50 to 60-year-old that finds himself in that situation?
Yeah, so two angles. If you still have a job, right, park as much money as you can, because retirement is just, because even if you want to work, not many professions allow you to work, right? There is a certain, like, if you're working in a factory, no one's going to have you after 65. They just retire you. Not many people are fortunate like we are to maybe continue to work in their 70s and 80s, right? So let's first understand that. So if you are that individual who is not allowed to work in your profession, you can do something else for sure, right? But there is a risk in that, right? That might not be a monetary payoff like you imagine. So I would park a lot of money, right? Because you are an empty nester, you don't have responsibilities right now. So I would park a lot of money in that age, because that age the savings are quite high, right? Into specifically like low risk investments. I would say a lot of dividend funds are there, like bond funds are there, GICs are there, right? Max out all your TFSA. TFSA again, priority number one,
Yes.
right? Then like, let's say, then probably look into RRSPs and stuff with whatever we have discussed in your mind. So try to do that. Try, like there are two schools of thoughts. People say that you should pay off your mortgage, right, in those years, so that you are debt free in your retirement, right? But there are two schools of thought for that. If you can manage your money well, if you're getting a higher yield than what your mortgage is giving, because people don't understand, in a mortgage, in the initial years you're just paying interest. In the later years, that is when you are an empty nester, when you are in your 50s, you're probably paying just principal.
Yes.
Right? You've already paid that interest. So if you haven't paid off your mortgage till then, there is very little merit in paying off mortgage during that time, because you're just going to pay principal, right?
Mm-hmm.
The interest has already been taken off, right? The way mortgages are structured, for people who are not aware, when you get a new mortgage, initially you pay very high interest.
Yeah.
The principal component is very low.
Yeah.
And as you move through years, the principal component gets larger and larger. So if you have a 25-year mortgage,
Yeah.
when you were 30, right, or when you were 35 or 45, right, when you're in your 50s, closer to retirement, you're just paying principal.
Here's something else as
Yeah.
well, because I'm so close to making those decisions, is that running a house today
Yes.
has a lot of other costs that have also gone up. So even when you may have paid off your mortgage, taxes have gone up, heating has gone up, maintenance has gone up.
Yes.
Changing your roof or fixing your roof is different now than it was 20
Insurance.
years ago. Insurance. There are all these other costs. And if you do the comparison in retirement of what it really is going to cost you to live in your house versus renting, you might need to do a comparison and look at where your money is best being utilized for you. Because I think we grew up in a time when you get your house and you pay it off. But the cost of running a house today, you might love your house and want to stay in your house, but it's actually more expensive to stay in your house. And depending on, again, what vision you have for yourself,
Yes.
I don't think it's all one, there's not one rule anymore. I think there's a whole lot of rules with a lot of other variables at play.
Yeah, and like I was talking to a big real estate investor, like she's a multi-millionaire, right, in Edmonton actually, and she gave me a very good perspective about it. If you are sitting on a lot of home equity, probably a good time to use it, right? Because for real estate to grow, there has to be a constraint. So this is very important to understand. People think, oh, the real estate will always keep on going up at the same rate it
Yes,
has.
and it won't.
Like last 2019 to 2025, probably the housing prices have doubled, right? For most people or close to that, right? I don't see that continuing, right? And it's not my view. Like, she gave me a very good perspective. Real estate has to be constrained in order to grow. What's the constraint in Canada? The constraint is there is like land, we have the second highest amount of land after Russia. We're the largest country in the world, second largest in the world. So land is not a constraint. Singapore does have a land constraint, right? So we are not like them. Then there is no constraint of there was a constraint in between because the demand was quite high because we were taking 4% of our population every year. But we have decided, irrespective of who wins in the election, we have decided not to do that. So there are going to be immigration cap. So there is the supply is going to be, the demand is going to be constrained.
Wouldn't the cost of building a home be a constraint?
The cost of building a home is a constraint, right? But if you look at cost, it is an artificial, cost of building a house is not, it is probably 50% of what you pay. Less than 50% of what you pay. The major cost is the government. The fees, the red tape, all of that has a cost to it. But all parties agree right now to cut that red tape. All parties, whether it is the liberals who come in or conservatives that come in, so that's going to close down. So
what does she suggest for later in life if you're sitting a lot of equity and you're pre-retirement?
Use that somehow.
In what sense?
So one way to use it is probably get a long-term mortgage right now, right? Just extend your mortgage, right? Refinance your mortgage into a long-term. So you open up the cash flows, right?
And then that cash flow can go into your TFSA.
Yes. Or in the next few years, it will not happen all of a sudden. Of course, we are going to be the housing supply doesn't ramp up overnight. So you have a 5 to 10 years runway until we ramp up the housing construction, right? So what do you do in the meantime? Probably a good idea to just encash the home equity, right? Rent out, like you were saying, it's lower cost to rent than to own, right? For sure, for seniors. And maybe look at some exotic options to spend some time, like Portugal or those.
So that's when you start talking about arbitraging your life.
Yes.
Because as we hit the next generation going into your 60s and we are sitting on all this equity and we're healthier than our parents were.
Yes.
And a whole lot of variables. It's just different. And we imagine retiring different. We might still work part-time or we'll have a small business, etc. The only way to cut our expenses then is to spend part of the year where it's not so expensive.
Yeah, and probably better environment and stuff. So that's a question that I wanted to ask you. If you have to arbitrage your life, what are the key points that you will look for?
I would say I'd want something familiar. So if I was going back and spending part of the year or majority of the year elsewhere other than here in Alberta, I would want familiar. So I have started doing fam tours and visiting countries. I want someplace that is ideally one flight. If I expect people to come visit me or to get home easily, I want one flight. So Toronto, a direct flight, I would say from Toronto or Vancouver or Calgary. I don't consider flying Calgary to Toronto actually part of a trip because I've always got people to see in Toronto. But if I can get somewhere with one flight, I would also, that's one thing I've been looking at. So western edge of Europe, Portugal. Going south, I like to stay in the same time zone or 1 hour difference. So if I am teaching or talking with people, we're only 1 hour different. So I love Central America and parts of South America, although you start moving over to the east. I also look for a weather that I'm going to thrive in. So people like different weather. So I want a dry climate I want mountains. Would love mountains and water, but I want to be more in maybe some highlands. But I want dryness, something similar to here, to Alberta. So, yeah, that's what I would look. Familiarity, ease to travel for myself and for friends and family. And then I want a better weather. I love the change of seasons, but I could maybe just do with 9 months and not the winter, just with some health issues I have. That's what I look for. And being able to just easily access Canada, come back and forth, and have people visit.
Because those are great points, because like especially Western Europe, like have a similar healthcare system as we do.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and the healthcare costs are not that, because people go to Florida, right? And I'm not against that.
Well, they're starting to leave, but yes, Florida is a typical.
Florida is
Arizona.
a typical destination, especially for a lot of Albertans to go there. But the problem with Florida is the healthcare costs are very expensive. Like US is like where probably you should go to make money, not to spend money, because it's not
That's
cheap.
interesting.
Yeah, it's not. People think it's very cheap. It's not cheap. Like if you look at Western Europe, right? The real estate is far cheaper. The rents are far cheaper, right? Especially if you're comparing to cities like cities in Florida. And like the healthcare premiums are not that expensive. The quality of healthcare is quite good, right? So we might have to rethink Florida for a lot of Albertans. Trade wars are doing that, but also like just looking at it financially, it makes better sense. Plus, it's not that like it's one flight away from Toronto, so
it's direct from Calgary too. So you're saying Florida is an option. Trade wars aside.
Yeah. Florida is an option, but people think it's it's not. It's expensive right now. The insurance cost is sky high. So if you sell your property and move down there, the insurance is going to be extremely expensive, right, to do there. Of course, like the cost of living is still cheaper than Alberta. Like nothing beats Canada in like the cost of living, like sadly so, especially if you're from Toronto or Vancouver, right? So but look at other options, like Panama is where people retire, and there is a financial merit to do that, right? Your money goes longer, right? Let's say you have a $2.5 million of corpus by the time you retire, in selling your house, taking
just your full estate,
right? And like pensions, you have to count. A lot of people do not count pensions in retirement in net worth, but you should count them because it's a regular cash flow, right?
And it's guaranteed.
It's guaranteed. So if you, let's say, have a $10,000 pension, so if you just divide that by 4 or multiply it by 25, like that is $250,000 worth of investment. So count all of that. If you are hitting 2.5 million, you can withdraw 100,000 reliably for the next foreseeable future. Like if you even invest in lower earning assets, and $100,000 is quite enough. Might not be in Canada right now, but it is quite enough to stay in a lot of countries.
Well, I know that you've mentioned this, and I've seen this with others on other influencers and on YouTube about the tax advantages of being married early in career, mid-career, raising family, and in retirement. And so it's an interesting concept, because I listened to somebody recently that actually said it's discriminatory, the tax systems. So when I was starting to realize this, and I sort of pushed back, I was so excited for one of your articles recently, but the other side of it is we have so many people divorcing later in life now. The grade divorce rate's up. People, particularly women, are choosing to live alone. And then they're planning for retirement. And if they're not briefed on all of what we've just talked about and didn't start generationally 40 years ago, and then you're hit with all these, there's zero tax advantage to be single
Yeah.
later in life.
In fact, it is quite punitive. The system is quite punitive.
It's very punitive.
Because we did not talk about the last cohort, the people who have already
retired.
So let's compare.
Okay,
that.
let's segue into that.
It's a rant. But
here's the rant now.
Yeah. So let's say.
Yeah.
We will simply compare a couple versus a single person. Okay, a couple has $100,000 of pension, right? Just
together,
employer pension together.
Okay,
right? And a single person who has $100,000 of pension on their own. It could be from RRSPs or employer or whatnot.
Gross income.
Now, what these couples can do? The couples can divide their pension, right? So let's say only one person has $100,000 coming in. They can say we are splitting that pension.
Each 50.
So each 50. So what does that do? That lowers their tax bracket, right?
Less tax.
So less taxes. Point number one. Second, their old age security is higher for both of them because there is no clawbacks in old age security, right?
And they're both eligible.
Third thing, there is a pension tax credit. So each person gets $2,000 of pension tax credit. So if there are two individuals and both of them are getting pensions, then both of them get $2,000 each. That is $4,000 of pension tax credit. That is $600 of less taxes, $60 per month of less taxes that they pay. Right? Now,
that's significant.
Now let's compare that to a single person who has $100,000 of pension.
Yes.
They get $100,000, right? Old age security reduces above $90,000, so it's going to reduce, right?
Right.
So they get less old age security. Point number one. Second, they will be in higher tax bracket because $100,000 is like taxed at higher tax rate than $50,000. The third thing that it's punitive. I say that. The third thing is they're going to only get $2,000 of pension tax credit.
The tax credit once for the household.
Yes. And it's so discriminatory.
Yeah, and because anybody.
And more of our country is single right now.
Than ever
before. And it is increasing. So like there is a Bloc Québécois proposal in the French debate. Like they're saying, why not allow people who have lots of RRSPs just to give tax-free money to kids, right, to buy houses, right? One way to rectify like how unfair the system is.
But that wouldn't necessarily help the married single system.
No, but like at least it's a start of no one is having that conversation, right?
Nobody is having the conversation about the tax situation.
Yes.
For married versus single individuals.
Exactly.
And when you are a single female, you know that there is still a wage gap that we live with.
Yes.
Within our society.
Yes.
We still have careers. So let's imagine the 30s and 40s in particular, late 20s, 30s, 40s. You are penalized in your career and earning power when you step away from your career to have children. And you're making that up.
Most females have to take break for pregnancies.
Yes.
Right? I don't see any men getting pregnant, right? So they don't take any breaks for pregnancies.
No,
so
but
it
we
pushes
have
you back like lower
yes.
into like lower earnings over a lifetime.
And
right?
because when women go back into the workplace,
they don't go full time. It's hard to go full time.
Well,
right away.
A lot of women do.
Yeah.
And there's a whole lot around that. But to make up for the years of lost income and a whole lot of other generational or gender-specific house roles that people play, has a huge impact on a female's career and earning potential. So you get to your retired years, you have all these gaps that you've had to maneuver. And then you get to the stage of your retirement life. You still have these gaps that you've maneuvered. The male counterparts who are single have not had to do that. And then you have no tax credits. You have no way to lower your income. And let's just say you haven't looked ahead and done some tax planning to learn about these things. You're caught. And you're in one of the most expensive countries
So like
To live.
that's where the thought is, like just like take
Arbitrage
off,
your
yeah,
life.
just arbitrage your life, right, as much as you can, because people don't understand at like how many taxes we pay. Like I was just like amazed by it, right? Point number one, when you get income or pensions, you're going to be taxed. So that's income tax, right? Then whenever you buy and sell stuff, right, there is a GST,
Tax.
right? Tax 5% in Alberta, 10% everywhere else, right? Whatever you buy,
Because we don't have provincial
yeah.
sales tax.
Then you live in a house, you pay property tax, which is going up in two ways. Like the mill rate is going up. Every city the mill rate has gone up if you compare it vis-a-vis last like by 10 years back. And every city the property prices have moved up, right? So the property taxes are higher.
And in our city, let me interrupt you,
Yeah.
I also pay to park in front of my house.
Exactly. So parking costs, which
And-
were not there earlier.
No.
Now the city has decided.
Certain neighborhoods,
Yeah.
I happen to be in one of them.
Yes.
I pay for parking in front of my house, and I pay for guests to park in front of my house,
Absolutely.
even when the taxes have gone up.
Yes. So that's a tax. Utility bills have gone up.
Yes.
Right. And utility bills, like I was just checking about it, only 15 to 20% is actually users. Rest of it is all fees, right? Transmission fees, like carbon tax, right? This tax, that tax, right? So that is there, right? So utilities, you pay taxes. The telecom fees are the highest in the world in Canada, right? The amount of fees that we pay to just have a phone plan is the highest in the world. Almost we rank in top 5 countries in the world. So it's very expensive, right? So property taxes, phone bills, right? Groceries are very like.
Oh, for one
I was
person.
reading like it's 45% more than what Americans pay on an average, right? So again, higher, and Europeans pay even less than Americans do. So everything is more costly. Everything is taxed a lot. So there is a real arbitrage when you move outside of country.
And you noticed that recently when you traveled.
Yes.
As a family, you spent less on a daily basis, weekly, and you were gone for 6 weeks.
Yes.
And had money in your bank account when you got
Exactly.
home. And you were traveling. Now you were visiting friends and stuff, but take away your mortgage was paid here and you stayed with family, but food, entertainment, transportation, everything was cheaper.
Yeah, so we are taxed a lot. Everything is expensive because it's taxed multiple levels, multiple times, right? So effectively, there is a real arbitrage when you move outside of country, and you can maintain those Canadian pensions or Canadian income.
Yeah. And the challenge then becomes, who do you want around you when you're retiring, and if you're not comfortable traveling, or if you're single, and if you have a partner and you want to travel, then great.
Yes.
Or children you want to travel with. But I think there's a really big lifestyle decision to make here. I've only come to realize recently in our conversations and other reading, the cost of living in Canada for a single person, especially later in life, when you're wanting to work less, is exorbitant.
Yes.
And the cost of running a house. So I'm reconsidering everything and talking a lot to friends and other people who are questioning what to do next,
And
because the trade
Yeah.
wars have spurred on a lot of conversations.
Yeah, and especially if you are a single person, single women or men, right? You are going to be at a disadvantage the moment you retire, right? Couples can split their pension. There are like so many. You can even split CPP before the fact, but not after the fact, right? So that's
What do you mean before the fact and after
like
the fact?
you can like you cannot start splitting it after you have taken it, but when you fill the form, when you take it, you can split your CPP too. So if one person is
Oh.
higher earner, right? They can split the CPP
keep the
when
income down.
tax low. So there are so many disadvantages to live in this country, plus the costs are going to keep on going up, right, for the next foreseeable future, unless and until we really change, right, which is like I don't see that coming. So instead of that, like, it's a good time to encash your equity, right, go somewhere else, arbitrage your life, and live probably in a sunnier weather.
Well, we get a lot of sun in Calgary, but yes, warmer, more
Yeah.
moderate weather. But one of the key things I take away from everything you've shared and applying my situation, and I am reflective of a lot of people my age. I'm not unique, I guess, is
Yes.
what I'm trying to say, is that one of the things we have to do in every generation is make ourselves financially literate, to understand what those accounts are used for, not just for the moment, but for the long term.
Absolutely.
And to imagine where you want to start building those. I also want everyone to know it is not too late, ever. To become financially literate, especially when you want to stop working and do something you choose to do, or take a few years off to go play, or whatever it is you want. The more you understand how to leverage your money and your estate that you have, and it does not matter how big or small, it's what you have, it can go farther than we even imagine.
Yeah, absolutely.
But we have to know how to use these accounts. And we have to be ready to redefine what that stage of our life is about. Whether you're going to take a sabbatical. I read somewhere, Harry, that families are starting to do mini retirements throughout their lives as they raise their children. The parents don't want to work for the entire childhood.
Yes.
So I read about
doing that, right, Andrew?
Yes,
Yeah.
They're taking off and going to Panama, and they're going to live there for a year together with their children while they go to school.
Absolutely.
And they don't imagine it forever, but they want to live that lifestyle. And those are discussions now people are having. I would not have even imagined that 30 years ago. So there are options today. There are ways to make yourself financially literate. And just remember, we have generational differences because we didn't have access to this kind of information that
And
we
those
have
products,
today.
right? Like,
And there's
means
new products and new ways to do things.
people, please research, especially if you're retired. Like, we were talking before the show, there are like great investment products right now that pay you regular dividend no matter what, right? So there are covered call ETFs, there are like high dividend paying ETFs, low volatility ETFs that are great retirement products, right? And try to research more, because handing your money to someone to manage it, right, not a great idea.
Yeah. You still have to understand how your money's working for you.
Yes.
Understand what you want and have your plan and strategy. And what you imagine in your 20s might change when you're in your 50s and 60s.
For sure.
But that means you still can be in charge and still understand what is in your best interest and not rely solely on somebody else. Still ask the questions even when someone's managing your estate.
And just a last thought, people who are single, the system penalizes you, especially when you retire. So you have to save more to factor that in, right?
Yeah, there's
there is
more of it.
nothing we can do until and unless you run for Congress and change that, right? Or run for the House of
I was gonna
Commons
say
and
that.
change that.
Maybe I have my next
Right.
career.
But if you are not planning to do that, then probably it's a good idea to save more, right? Just to cushion yourself against that penalizing.
Save more, and the only option we have, because
Be
to make
smart with
profit,
your money.
yeah, to
Yeah.
make profit, right, in business, you increase revenues, decrease expenses.
Yes.
So for retired singles, we have to save more, but we also have to think about how we want to live, because the only other options we have
Yes.
is to cut living expenses.
Exactly.
There are no other options.
Yes. Thank you, Jackie. Great conversation.
Yeah, you've given me more to think about. But
Absolutely.
and we could rant some more, but that's enough for today. Please remember, everybody, Financial literacy is important.
Yeah.
Understanding your
But
bank
we have a
accounts.
good segment for the next rant. How about like how the financial system is unfair to singles? That could be a good rant for the next episode.
I think so. Let's
Yeah.
look at that. Let's
Life,
do some more reading.
finance, and like,
Life, finance,
and everything, like how
raising children,
yeah.
taking care of parents.
Yeah. So let's talk
have a
about
look at that
in the
next.
one. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks. Hope this was helpful.
Oh, this was a good one.